Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. My name is Nathan Cole, and I knew I was destined for greatness the minute I realized I shared my name with a famous British explorer. The concept of governing, of being at the top, was appealing. Of course, I realized early on that being a true monarch was unrealistic in today's environment. But the desire to conquer and rule never left me. I intended to not only win, but to annihilate any opposition. I strived to be the greatest in all I attempted. For the most of my life, I succeeded. I excelled academically, athletically, and professionally. I was persistent, meticulous, and, yes, brutal when required. People adored me, feared me, and knew I would not accept anything less than excellence. I was Nathan Cole, an unstoppable force. But there was one area where my desire to win faltered, a spot where all of my plans and resolve failed me. My marriage to Lena. It did not just end, it crashed and burned in a manner that still aches. Allow me to explain in full. I'm an accounting major and work for a well-known consulting business. On the surface, it seems as tidy and respectable as you'd expect, a place of order, numbers, and balance sheets. However, there is more to life than meets the eye. Our company has a secret, not very scandalous, just one, and it's more intriguing than frightening. Our firm's owner has a tight relationship with Matthias, a Venezuelan drug kingpin. I can't remember Matthias' last name, which is immaterial, yet his name alone conveys weight. Matthias' moniker is a paradox. He is an angel, but not just any angel. This is the angel of judgment. His narrative is movie-worthy. Matthias had a normal life until he learned he was the son of an infamous drug lord. That discovery altered everything in a dramatic twist worthy of any crime story. Matthias came home to take his post. He didn't merely enter his father's world quietly. Oh no, he blazed a road in blood. He began by eliminating his family's enemies, specifically his uncle, before moving on to his own father, whom he also killed. The prodigal son did come home, but it wasn't an emotional reunion. Matthias emerged as the new kingpin. That sounds amazing, doesn't it? I now manage Matthias' account, which includes the angel of judgment himself. It's not something you boast about at company parties, but it still seems substantial. I've only had the privilege, or misfortune, depending on your perspective, of meeting the guy in person once. To be honest, he seemed ordinary, a person you'd pass on the street without looking twice. There is no sense of threat, no dramatic flair. If you didn't know his tale, you'd assume he was an accountant himself. But what about his right-hand man? That's another tale. Creepy cannot even begin to describe it. Every time you meet him, he has this strange habit of asking, "Do you like soup? Do you like soup?" So, what sort of question is that? And why do you ask it so forcefully? I couldn't tell whether it was a bizarre joke or if the man was simply really fascinated with soup. I tasted his unique soup once out of curiosity and perhaps a little pressure. He claimed it was something amazing, something I'd never forget. I didn't taste anything special, but the way he and his companion, an even creepier man with a chuckle that could curdle milk, watched me eat was unsettling. They laughed afterward, a knowing, mocking sound that made me nervous. I sat there, soup dish empty, feeling like the punchline of a joke I didn't get. I couldn't get the impression that they were playing a prank on me that I wasn't aware of. In instances like this, I wish I had learned martial arts in school. If I had, I could have given them a lesson for life. So, back to my story. I married Lena. Yes, it's always a Lena, right? There is something about the name. I met her at a neighborhood party, one of those uninteresting networking affairs when everyone pretends to care about small chat. She strolled in wearing a crimson outfit that caused the room to pause for a second. And with that, I was captivated. She wasn't only lovely, she had an aura, a fascination that drew you in. Lena was intelligent, sharp-witted, and had a way of smiling at my jokes that made me feel like the only guy on the planet. She was my next challenge, as someone who had always regarded life as a battleground to conquer. I want her in the same way that Alexander the Great sought new territories. And when I want something, I won't stop until I get it. Winning Lena over was not simple, however. She was not the kind of lady you could entice with a few smart phrases or a lavish meal. She had expectations, limits, and a way of keeping me on my toes. But that simply made the chase more exciting. I fought for her devotion in the same way I had worked for every other success in my life, with tenacity, strategy, and an unwavering will to succeed. When I eventually broke through her defenses, it was well worth the effort. Lena was intoxicating, not only because of her appearance. She had a fire within her that matched mine, and that made everything between us electrifying. What about sex? Incredible. It wasn't just physical. It was as amazing as the Hulk crushing the whole lineup of the Avengers and the Illuminati on his own. I had to make sure that all we had was mine and mine alone. So, after a year of great evenings, laughing, and times when I felt like I was finally living my best life, I made the decision to lock it down. I asked the question, and she responded sure. Lena worked as an office assistant at a law business, and her boss name was Damian Ashford. Damian was the kind of person who would stroll into a room and demand attention without saying anything. You could see it in his stance, sneer, and the way he scanned individuals like chess pieces. He was a conqueror, just like me. But there was one clear difference. Damian wanted everything. Not only prosperity or power. Everything. I initially met him at one of Lena's workplace parties. She had urged that I accompany her, claiming that it was vital for her colleagues to meet me. I was not delighted, but I went for her. I saw him as soon as I came in, holding court in the middle of the room, a drink of scotch in hand and laughing too loudly at his own jokes. He saw me almost instantly, and his eyes narrowed slightly. It was subtle, but I got it. When Lena introduced us, I extended my hand with a grin that barely reached my eyes. "Nathan Cole," I announced. "Lena's fiancé." "Damian Ashford," he said, holding my hand just a little too firmly. "This is Lena's supervisor." Nice to finally meet the guy she's been talking about. His tone was challenging, and I responded with my own. "I'd say the same about you, Damian. Lena has told me everything about you. What an empire you've built here." He laughed and released my hand. "An empire? Hardly. Just a man who knows what he wants and pursues it." His attention shifted quickly to Lena and then back to me. "Well, you've done a fine job," I responded, my tone calm but sharp enough to let him know I'd seen his expression. "However, I believe that the finest things in life are not constructed. They've won." Our gazes held for a second longer than necessary, a wordless conflict. A test of willpower. By the conclusion of the handshake, I knew I had won the round. He knew it as well. I saw a glimpse of anger in his eyes before he smiled politely. "Enjoy the party," he replied, his tone brimming with phony politeness. "Oh, with Lena by my side, I will," I said, mirroring his phony grin. Damian Ashford disliked me, and it was evident from that moment. And I, too, had no feelings for the guy. The second time I saw Damian Ashford was at a home party. It wasn't my scene, but Lena urged that we mix. I reluctantly consented, knowing it would be another tiresome evening of small conversation and passive-aggressive digs from Damian. When we arrived, the party was in full flow, but the emphasis in the room was not on beverages or talks. Everyone was gathered around a large flat-screen television, watching UFC 212. Sure, it was my sort of entertainment, but as I surveyed the room, I saw the vibe was skewed significantly. The audience, including Damian, was ecstatic, cheering for Diego Alvarez. I've never liked Mendez. Something about him annoyed me. Perhaps it was his arrogance? Perhaps it was because everyone adored him. In any case, he was not for me. What about Marco Rivas? Not my fave, either. Still, I'd go with Navarro simply to upset the audience. It is not always about like someone. It may also be about standing out from the crowd. Damian, of course, was in the heart of it all, holding a drink and laughing loudly. As I approached, he saw me and grinned. "Kane," he said, elevating his drink slightly. "I'm glad you could make it. You arrived just in time to witness Mendez put Navarro to sleep." I shrugged and leaned against the counter. I would not depend on that. Navarro is a scrapper. He may just knock Mendez out cold. The room became silent for a time as Damian turned to face me directly, his smile expanding into something more predatory. "Knock him out? Navarro against Diego Alvarez?" He gave a harsh chuckle. "Kane, I know you like to take the opposing viewpoint, but that's ludicrous. Mendez is going to walk all over him." I crossed my arms and met his eyes steadily. "Well, see." He arched an eyebrow before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a single $50 cash. With a flourish, he set it on the coffee table in the middle of the room. "Do you want to make it interesting?" he inquired, his voice filled with confidence. The room was silent, with anxiety sizzling between us. I wasn't going to back down, not to him. It was not about the money. It was never about money. It was pride. Without saying anything, I went into my pocket, took out a $50 note, and put it alongside his. The atmosphere in the room was electrifying, with everyone riveted to the television as the battle started. Lena was seated with a bunch of people, and she was roaring for Mendez, which annoyed me. Her voice, which was typically pleasant and soothing, suddenly conveyed a keen eagerness whenever Mendez landed a blow. I clenched my jaw. Yes, it was just a fight, but it felt like betrayal. Of all the individuals she could support, why him? Damien, of course, led the applause, yelling out predictions and nodding triumphantly whenever Mendez made a move. Do you see that? Too easy for Carlos, he yelled, his voice resonating over the room. Navarros got nothing. I remained silent, staring at the TV carefully. I did not need to say anything. I only had to wait. And then, 3 minutes and 45 seconds into the battle, something occurred. Navarro landed the left hook. The audience became silent when Mendez struck the mat, followed by a flurry of hits until the referee stepped in. The combat was finished. Navarro had finished it. I rose up, unable to contain the smile on my face. "Hell yeah," I exclaimed, disturbing the silence in the room. I looked at Damien, who sat still, his sneer wiped clean from his face. Walking to the coffee table, I reached down, picked up the two $50 notes, and displayed them for everybody to see. "Never underestimate the underdog," I remarked, my voice calm but sharp. The room remained still as I slid the cash into my pocket and turned to face Damien. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes blazed with barely contained rage. I gave him a victory salute and returned to Lena, who was looking at me with amazement and joy. Damien, for once, was speechless, and the stillness was better than any words he could have spoken to me. I couldn't stop smiling on my drive home that night. It was 3-1 now. Damien is no longer on my mind. When we arrived home, I also made sure it was 3-0 with Lena, if you get my meaning. Life felt terrific. These little successes motivated me. Gives me the adrenaline of being on top. But, looking back, I should have recognized it for what it was, the calm before a storm I couldn't have predicted. 4 months later, Lena and I married in a stunning ceremony. Damien, of course, was present. He had to be, since Lena insisted. And, like clockwork, he arrived with that annoying sneer on his face. When he walked up to congratulate us, he tightly gripped my hand and leaned in closer than required. "Congratulations, Kane," he replied effortlessly, his tone tinged with something I couldn't identify. "You've really outdone yourself." I held his eyes, refusing to flinch. "Thanks, Damien," I said calmly, taking my hand back. "Means a lot coming from you." His sneer grew, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something deeper in his eyes, resentment, maybe even hatred. He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice so that only I could hear. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I did not react. There was no reason to. I simply watched him walk away, leaving a cold in his wake. But I didn't allow him to get to me. Not that night. It was my wedding day, and no one, not even Damien Ashford, would destroy it. The honeymoon was everything I had dreamed for. Beautiful beaches, crystal blue water, and evenings filled with laughter and sensuality. For a time, I felt like I had genuinely ruled the world. When we returned, things fell into a familiar pattern. My accounts were prospering, Lena was content, and everything felt effortless. But, as they say, time does not stand still. It moves, shifts, and often carries stuff with it. Slowly but steadily, the ease I had become used to began to slide through my fingers. The air around me started to feel heavy, like if an invisible force was preparing to pull the rug from under me. Little did I realize that things were going to worsen. Much worse. 2 years into my marriage, I believed I had everything worked out. Life was predictable, yes, but it was a pleasant sort of routine. Until that night, when Lena came into the living room with an odd expression on her face and spoke those 4 words that could make any man's stomach sink like a stone. "Nathan, we need to talk." I'd heard that statement before from friends, coworkers, and even strangers at bars who were telling stories about their failed marriages. And it was never good. I poured myself a drink of Glenfiddich, settled into my favorite recliner, and prepared myself for whatever she had in store for me. "All right," I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "Let's hear it." She took a big breath and sat across from me, avoiding my gaze at first. Then she began. "Nathan," she said, her voice shaking. "My boss, Damien, is single, right?" I nodded carefully, uncertain where this was leading, but immediately felt tightness crawl up my neck. "Yeah, I understand. How about it?" "Well," she said, her words flowing quickly. "He expressed his desire to become a parent to me. He has been there for me, Nathan. When I didn't have a job, he employed me. He gave me a chance when no one else would, and now he has asked me to have a child. I froze mid-sip, the glass halfway between my lips. I gazed at her, unable to understand what I had just heard. Come again? He wants me to have his baby, she said, her voice softer but firm. My chuckle burst out before I could stop it. It was short, harsh, and devoid of humor. Let me get this straight, I remarked, placing the glass down. He wants to give over a small cup with a seed, and they'll take your egg and mix it in a petri dish and plant it in a surrogate somewhere in Singapore or something, and we'll all sit around and wait for his child to arrive? Lena shook her head and chewed her lip anxiously. No, Nathan. He doesn't want to do it that way. He prefers to follow traditional methods. Like a man and a woman. My stomach twisted. My rage began to boil over. I sprang up so quickly that the chair almost tumbled over. No. Thank you, I said forcefully, my voice louder than I meant. My wife is no baby factory. I took a long breath, allowing the first shock of Lena's remarks to set in. Then I turned to her with as much calm as I could summon, my voice hard and unwavering. And the only baby you'll ever have will be mine, I replied, narrowing my gaze. Do I express myself clearly? Lena's lips quivered, and she moved closer to me. Nathan, please. Listen. No, I interrupted her, lifting my hand. If you have any more questions or views on this absurd subject, let me save us both some time. This conversation is over. She stretched out as if to grasp my arm, desperation written on her features. Nathan needs me. Don't you understand? He was there for me when nobody else was. I owe him this. I abruptly turned around, my voice now tinged with rage. Lena, let me be clear. You will either have my kid or get divorced. These are your only two choices. Do you comprehend what I'm saying? Her expression changed instantaneously. Her face stiffened, and her voice became colder. He was right about you, she admitted, practically spitting the words. You are selfish. You just care about your ego, not what I desire. Nathan, you'll regret this. Mark my words. Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed her handbag and walked out of the home, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, the sound of the door echoing around the silent home. My pride, what little of it left after such a humiliating encounter, kept me in place. I told myself she needed time to calm down, that she would see reason and return on her own. I wasn't about to run after her. Not this time. I was sitting in my large, luxurious gaming chair, deeply absorbed in God of War. As I slayed monsters and researched Norse mythology, my surroundings disappeared. But suddenly, unexpectedly, something struck the back of my skull. My eyesight clouded, and everything became dark. I didn't even have time to process what was going on before I fell asleep. When I regained consciousness, my head throbbed, and I struggled to concentrate. My body felt rigid and my wrists ached. I attempted to move, but was held. I glanced around and realized I was tied up. The chilly, familiar surroundings of my living room didn't help matters. The furniture was in place, but the mood seemed completely different, heavy and oppressive. What the heck happened? How did I get here? My thoughts raced, trying to put together the scattered events leading up to this. But there was no response. Only eerie quiet around me. Then I saw Lena enter the room, absolutely nude. What about behind her? Damien. He smiled. Damien approached, his gaze fixed on mine, and Lena leaned in, tenderly placing her lips on mine. I pushed against the shackles, my heart pounding in my chest, but she just drew back and returned to Damien's side. They began having sex right in front of me. I attempted to remain calm, despite Damien's comments being like knives to my chest. He continued to fling insults, each one harsher than the previous. You're just a weak man, he scoffed. Ordinary. Nothing extraordinary. You believe you're something? You are nothing, Nathan. I clenched my hands at my sides, telling myself to remain calm, to deny him the gratification of witnessing me crumble. But he wasn't finished. You're nothing compared to me, he said, his tone haughty and arrogant. And when Lena has my kid, you'll be nothing but a servant. You will care for her throughout her pregnancy. You will meet all of her requirements. And after the child is born, I will remove it from you. It will be mine, not yours. You will give it over without question. My heartbeat was racing. My blood was beating in my ears. Every word he spoke seemed like a threat, like he was pouring salt in the wound, challenging me to do something about it. I wanted to shout, fight back, but I knew it wouldn't help. Damien was always able to make himself seem larger than life. Of going under your skin. You're going to be a good boy, Nathan, he teased. Make sure Lena is comfortable. Make sure everything is great for her while she is carrying my kid. She will need you to be strong for her. And you'll do it. You have no option. You'll do as I say, like the pathetic little guy you are. My jaw constricted, but I couldn't let him realize how much he was affecting me. I needed to keep focused. Do you think I'm just going to roll over for you? I inquired, my voice firm despite the anguish inside. Do you think you can simply walk in here and dictate everything? Damien grinned. Of course you will. Will you do all it takes to make Lena happy? You'll be the ideal little husband, taking care of her while I'm out making my mark. You will not stand in my way. You know you can't. His words struck more than anything bodily. I could not let him win, but I couldn't lose control. Lena did not deserve any of this. None of it. Don't worry, Nathan, Damien added with a big smile. She will return on her own. And when she does, you'll know your position. You'll know exactly what to do. Then he approached me, examined my pockets, and pulled out two $50 He held them up and said, I win. Damien's words reverberated in my thoughts as I sat there with my wrists shackled. It was humiliating. The rage. The bitterness of failure. Everything is whirling inside of me. When Lena emerged from the shower, she approached me, her eyes filled with an unnerving combination of shame and anticipation. Her hands trembled slightly when she unfastened me. Then she said it. The words felt like orders. A command. Be a good boy, she murmured quietly, her voice straining. Come to bed with me. I did not move. I simply sat there, looking at her, my eyes cold and lifeless. It didn't appear like a guy in love. It was the look of a shattered man, who knew there was nothing more to mend. My quiet sat heavy in the air. Lena's face faltered, and for the first time, I saw a spark in her eyes. Regret. She recognized what she had done, what she had permitted. The implications of her conduct were now evident. But I was not the same person she had married. She had no idea how to contact me anymore. Without saying anything further, she turned and returned to her room. She closed the door behind her with a gentle click. I remained there for many hours, the weight of everything bearing down on me. I could not remain. I would not remain. Not like this. Not after all. I rose up, my legs wobbly, and made my way to the restroom. I glanced in the mirror and saw blood on my face, fresh from the wound on my skull. The sight of that just fueled the hatred burning behind my skin. I wiped my face, leaving streaks of red on the cloth. But it didn't matter. The blood was simply another reminder of how far I'd gone. I went back to our bedroom, fist clenched. I knocked on the door. Lena, I cried out, my voice low and threatening. Open the door. Nothing. I knocked again. This time, it's harder. My irritation is growing. I'll count to 3, I murmured, my voice firm despite the fire inside me. And if you don't open this door, it'll break it down. I heard her shuffle behind the door. When I grabbed for the doorknob, it creaked open. I did not wait for her to say anything. I walked inside, my clothing smeared with blood. My face is an unreadable mask. She stood there with her eyes wide and her hands quivering. I didn't care anymore. I went over to the closet and began collecting my belongings into a bag, clothes, shoes, everything I could grab in the moment. Lena ran to me, attempting to stop me. Her hands reached for my arm. No, Nathan, she implored, her voice breaking. Please don't. I turned to look at her. I didn't say anything, but the expression in my eyes was plenty. There was nothing else to say. I could not remain. Not with her anymore. Not after what had occurred. Lena quickly pulled away, her face bereft of color. Her hands fell to her sides. I climbed into my vehicle, not worrying about the blood on my clothing. The pain, the rage, the frustration. Everything seemed blurry now. I wanted a haven where the outside world couldn't affect me. My workplace was the only location where I found comfort. Despite the fact that the distance was minimal, the journey seemed like it took hours. When I finally arrived, the guard spotted me and virtually raced over, his eyes widening as he saw the blood on my face and the wrath still blazing in my eyes. Without saying anything, he guided me into a chair and began administering first aid with kind but rapid hands. Should I call 911? He inquired, his voice tight with apprehension. I shook my head, not wanting anybody to interrupt. No, just call Graham, I mumbled, wiping my cheeks with the back of my palm. The guard hesitated but then dialed Graham's phone. Graham arrived at the door after a few minutes. He walked in quickly, his eyes scouring me for any indication of what had transpired. Without saying anything, he indicated for me to follow him into the conference room. We sat in the silence of the room. Graham said nothing at first. His eyes remained fixed on me, examining me with an almost unreadable attitude. I could not figure out what he was thinking. I couldn't read him. Not as usual. I eventually ended the stillness. Damien came to my house, I said, my voice scratchy but firm. He did this. I stopped myself, unsure how to explain. The words felt inadequate for the storm that had occurred. He threatened me. We spoke about kidnapping Lena. Graham did not interrupt. He just sat there, his stare fixated on me, quiet as always. The stillness between us lingered, and I couldn't help but note how unusual it was. Graham always had something to say, always had a plan, always knew the appropriate thing to do. But now he was just sitting there. His look is remote. It's as if he already knew. It was disturbing. My mind raced, attempting to put it all together. The expression in his eyes. He knew. He knew this was going to happen. Graham rose slowly, the weight of his words lingering in the air. His eyes, which were normally keen and calculating, were clouded with a seriousness I had not seen before. He took a few steps toward the window and talked with his back to me. His voice was quiet but full of gravitas. Damien, he said, is the brother of a Venezuelan drug kingpin. His name is Joaquin. They are fighting for control of this city. I blinked, trying to keep up with the discovery. Damien? Are you connected to a drug cartel? Graham continued. Joaquin lives in Caracas. Damien does business here, right beneath our noses. My mind strained to process the information. Damien, the guy I had been dealing with, the guy who had made my life an absolute nightmare, was linked to one of the most dangerous figures in the drug trade? Graham turned towards me, his countenance hardening. You're lucky you're still alive, he added, his voice becoming harsher. Damien is a nasty guy. He has a history of murder. People got in his path. People that disobeyed him. He is cruel. He just cares about himself. He goes with his bodyguards. Joaquin has yet to get his paws on him. Damien is excessively cautious. However, he will make a mistake at some point. They always do. The weight of Graham's remarks fell on me like a suffocating cloud. Damien wasn't simply a petty thug. He was part of something far larger. Something I had no clue I had been entangled in. He was playing a game beyond anything I could have imagined. I sat there, digesting everything. Damien was dangerous. No, worse than that. He was a monster. A member of a criminal empire that extended well beyond the boundaries of this city. He had messed up my life. And I now understand why. However, nothing changed. He had threatened me. He had made his move. And I wasn't going to sit back and let him win. I slowly gazed up at Graham, my voice firm despite the tornado inside me. I will take him out. Graham's gaze fixed on mine, evaluating my words. His face is unreadable. You are large and powerful, Nathan. But Damien is dangerous, he replied, his voice thicker, as if he was warning me. He isn't simply a street thug. This guy's a professional. You don't simply stroll into his world and emerge unhurt. I understood his cautionary remarks. I'd seen Damien's capabilities. His threats were just the tip of the iceberg. But the notion of him being with Lena and taking control of all I'd worked for made something in me snap. There was no going back now. I leaned forward, a flash of clarity breaking through the cloud of my rage. He'll come to my place when I'm not there. To pleasure himself with Lena. He'll assume I've left for good. You may bring him there. Lay an ambush. I never saw his guards enter my home, so he will be alone inside. It will be the ideal opportunity for you to make a move. Graham remained quiet for a minute, contemplating my proposal. I could see the wheels moving in his brain as he examined every perspective. He finally nodded, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. He recognized the opportunity. Without saying anything, he took out his phone and phoned a number. It's Graham, he said as soon as the other guy picked up. We have a plan. I need you to listen carefully. He looked at me and nodded slightly. The target will be alone. We take him there. I didn't hear the remainder of the talk, but Graham's tone suggested it was serious. He hung up and glanced back at me. It's finished. We'll address it in the morning. The blood on my face had been wiped up. The wound on my head was patched by a doctor who asked no questions. My wounds were healed up. What about the emotional ones? They would take longer to recover. I moved into a new apartment. A location that seemed remote and foreign. A temporary safe house. Graham's method of keeping me out of sight while events were in motion. And then, as the sun rose, the door to my new flat opened. Graham came in first, followed by two other guys. I recognized one of them as Matthias' right-hand man, the soup lover. The second guy, however, was unknown to me. He had an aura of power about him, something harmful, like a predator. Graham introduced him. This is Sebastián Herrera, he introduced himself. But around here, we call him El Cazador del Dolor. Initially, the name did not make sense. Cazador del Dolor, I repeated, attempting to make meaning of the words. Which type of name is that? Graham shrugged, a small smirk flashing over his lips. I know, weird names. But you'll figure out what it means soon enough. Graham fixed me with a stern glance, his words still hanging in the air. This is Matthias Mesa Vega, he continued, motioning to the guy who just arrived. We call him El Pasador, the soup maker. You'll figure out what it implies soon enough. I couldn't help but raise my eyebrows. I got a shiver at the moniker, but I didn't ask for further information. I had a nagging sense I'd dislike the response. Instead, I nodded and took in the new arrivals. These folks were not only engaged in illicit activities. They were part of something much deeper, far more cruel. Graham then outlined the idea. Someone would have to keep a watch on my home while everything was put in motion. It seemed weird to know that someone would be observing my stuff. But there was no turning back now. My life had become a battle zone, and I was trapped in the center of it. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. Lena's name appeared over the screen. I paused for a bit before responding, switching the phone to speaker so that everyone could hear it. Are you coming home? Lena's voice came through, sweet, but with a hint of expectancy. I swallowed the rage that was rising inside me and forced my voice to remain calm. You are dead to me, Lena. I will be seeking for divorce. There was laughter on the other end. A nasty and sarcastic chuckle. Damien's not going to like that, she smugly said. Are you not being a good boy? However, you will learn your lesson soon enough. You'll see what happens if you don't come home. I clenched my teeth and held back from snapping. I am not coming home. Go choke on your own spit and die. Her laughing persisted, but it made my blood boil. You need to come home, Nathan, she pleaded, her voice becoming increasingly stern. Please come home and make supper. Damien is coming over for supper. I told him he could prepare excellent meals. You'll want to be present when he arrives. I felt the weight of her words. The last jab. A reminder of how little I meant to her. My determination strengthened, and I spoke harshly. If I get home and discover him at my place, he'll cut up one of you and feed it to the other. Do not push me. I am not coming back. I didn't wait for her response. I hung up. The click of the call's conclusion resonated through the quiet that followed. Vega's hand rested on my shoulder. His grasp was quite tight. He gazed at me with a peculiar sense of enjoyment in his eyes, as if he found anything amusing about the circumstances. She said you can cook, he said hesitantly. Can you really cook? I tensed slightly at the inquiry. It was one of those situations when I had to choose between playing along and displaying more of myself than I wanted. I just nodded. I can cook a few things, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Vega's eyes shone with eagerness, and I felt a flutter of anxiety. Perhaps I might teach you some things. You might want to cook, he said, his tone changing. And I could see he was having much too much fun with this. I was unsure what he meant, but I had a hunch I was going to find out. In a manner I don't like. Before I could say much more, an automobile drew up outside. The engine's buzz relieved the strain. One of the men, someone I had never seen before, opened the door. He was wearing full battle gear. He had a black mask over his face. He did not say anything as he went forward, just pointed at me. Go and open the back door, he said. His speech sounded muffled beneath the mask. Don't make any noise. Just open the door and come back here. We will take care of the rest. I nodded and felt a tightening in my chest. It all began to seem real now. The strategy was being put into effect, and I was smack in the thick of it. I didn't ask any questions. I was unsure what the rest was, except I had no option except to obey directions. I climbed over the fence. As I approached the rear of the home, the cold metal dug into my hands. The air seemed dense. Each step I took seemed heavier than the previous. I knew just where the key was buried, in a little flower pot by the back entrance. It was always our little secret, a safety net in case we locked ourselves out. I raised the saucepan cautiously. I snatched the key and turned it inside the lock. The door creaked open, but I made certain to do it discreetly. Once inside, I shut the door behind me with a gentle click. I hurriedly retraced my steps. I made my way back to the waiting guys. My heart pounded in my chest, but I did not let it show. I couldn't afford to be noisy. Any errors? I returned to the group. And within minutes, 3 of the soldiers, armed with MP5s, their firearms are fitted with silencers, walked past me inside the home. I stood there, trying to calm my breathing. The minutes passed by terribly slowly. I could only guess what was going on within. Then abruptly, I saw the 3 guys come from the residence. Their motions are calm and deliberate. They pulled 2 people out behind them. My gut wrenched when I realized who they were. Lena and Damien. Both had black hoods over their heads. Their hands were firmly tied together. Both were bare. I couldn't see their faces well, but I knew I didn't have to see their faces to grasp what was going on. All of this occurred during the middle of the night. In total darkness. The sight of Damien tied and defenseless made me furious. I couldn't keep it together. I went to him, my hands locked into fists, eager to make him feel the misery he had inflicted. But before I could reach him, an icy hand grasped my shoulder and pulled me back. I swung around, only to see a rifle pointed at my chest. My heart skips a beat, but I did not oppose it. The individual carrying the rifle did not say anything. He merely indicated for me to get back inside the vehicle. It was not worth battling. Not now. The vehicle door slammed shut. I was forced inside. The engine sprang to life, and we drove off. The environment changed dramatically as the city disappeared into the distance. Lena and Damien were in different vans. Various routes. Different destiny. I could only guess where they were headed. What was happening to them? We eventually came to a halt after what seemed like a lifetime. 5 hours of quiet. The weight of everything was falling hard on me. The vehicle approached a modest brick structure in the midst of nowhere, surrounded only by desert. I didn't know where I was, but I didn't care. The oddness of the location mirrored the weight in my chest. The entrance of the little structure creaked open, and Vega walked out. He glanced at me with the same disturbing smile, the one that never appeared to fade. "Oh, you're here," he remarked, his tone unusually upbeat. "Come, let me show you a few culinary tips." I had no notion what he meant by this, but I had a hunch I was going to find out. The first several days seemed like an unending nightmare. Vega's teaching style was nasty and harsh. He did not simply teach me how to cook. He subjected me to experiences that no one should have to go through. I vomited more times than I could count. The stink of the components and the procedure was enough to make my stomach turn. The worst thing was that I passed out. The heat in the room and the foul odors made everything whirl till I passed out. But, despite everything, I got it through. On the 3rd day, Vega finally gave me a piece of paper, then spit on it, and signed it. A certificate. I couldn't understand why I had to go through such torment just for a piece of paper, but the arrogant expression on his face revealed all I needed to know. ID earned it. A damn soup-making certificate. The notion of everything I went through to obtain it makes me nauseous. The dude was awful, and I finally realized why they were laughing at me after I ate my first cup of soup. They were giggling because they knew exactly what it was composed of, what they had compelled me to create. The very notion of that soup makes me vomit. I awoke early, with the light just visible on the horizon. The enormity of what I had to undertake weighed heavily on my thoughts. I grabbed my chainsaw, the cold metal sending shivers down my spine as I cut the flesh. The procedure was systematic. It's almost mechanical by now, following all Vega had taught me. I could not afford to think about it. Not now. I cleaned the meat and made the soup with the same accuracy that had been pounded into me. I attempted to suppress my feelings. When I finished, I took a bath, scrubbing myself clean of all that had occurred in the previous days. I dressed in a new chef's uniform, hoping to look the part, even though I was well aware of the gravity of what I was about to do. I lifted up the platter, gently holding it with the soup boiling on top. After one final look in the mirror, I stepped out and approached Lena. She was seated at the table when I arrived. Her hair is a disaster. The right eye was swollen and bruised. It struck me. This was the lady who had previously been my wife. The person I thought I knew. But now she was simply another aspect of the work. I set the platter in front of her, my hands firm. She glanced up at me. Her eyes were wide with a combination of hope and despair. "Please save me," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "That lady who struck me, she's a terrible one. Please save me." I did not respond. I could not afford to. I sat down in front of her and looked at her without saying anything. The stillness between us was heavy and dense, until I finally spoke. "You must be hungry. Have some soup." A guy approached and gently loosened the ropes from Lena's hands. His moves are deliberate. She did not hesitate. She reached for the spoon with trembling hands. The process of eating became almost mechanical when she took her first drink. The spoon struck something metallic. A faint clink echoed across the otherwise quiet room. She took the spoon away and dug about in the dish. Her fingertips touched across something substantial. She slowly took out 2 pennies and put them on the table in front of her, staring at them in amazement. I observed her as her gaze shifted from the money to me. In that instant, she appeared to put it all together. The color was fading from her face. "These are Damien's coins," she muttered. The understanding dawned on her. I met her stare with the same frigid face I had maintained when I stepped in. I did not need to say much. She already knew the truth. "Yes," I said gently. "I had him eat his favorite coins. So they were deep into him. I chose to leave them there." Slow boiling caused the coins to come out on their own. I watched her intently, her breath catching as the full impact of my words dawned on her. Lena's body struck the floor with a dull thump. Her face became pallid as she lost consciousness. I scarcely registered it. My mind is numb in the aftermath of everything. Vega strolled in just as the hush fell. His steps were relaxed. He put a hand on my shoulder, his grin turning into something quite arrogant. "You did better than me," he replied, almost approvingly. Then, mockingly, he scratched his eye, as if emotional. "The theatrics are almost comical. I finally have a worthy heir to the title." I did not react. What was there to say? He straightened up, and his mood changed instantaneously. "Now get out of that dress before I tell everyone you never passed my test." "What's the truth?" I knew I couldn't pass the exam. Every time he took up the chainsaw, I puked and passed out. It wasn't that I lacked capabilities. Who the hell am I kidding? I am not capable of doing it. I've never understood how Vega could accomplish what he did. Perhaps he had no soul. Perhaps he was the devil himself. Regardless, I knew I'd never be like him. It wasn't until years later that I learned the whole narrative of Vega's life. I learned stuff I didn't want to know, things that revealed a lot about him. However, it did not make me feel any better about who I had become. The reality was, I was not a suit maker. I was just an accountant. A guy pulled into this world as a result of my own actions. Decisions I couldn't reverse. Joaquin was aggressively hunting for me, so returning to my city was not an option. So I made a decision. I opted to remain in Argentina. I currently reside in a decently sized apartment, well guarded, with 2 guys always keeping an eye on me. It's a bizarre existence, but it is mine. I got laid with ladies I never imagined I'd have a shot with. The type that only existed in my imagination. Marriage and commitment are unnecessary in the world I've made for myself. I'm content this way. I do not need anything else. I still manage Matthias' accounts, the same as previously, and meet with him as required. But such encounters are short, businesslike, nothing personal. Vega still meets with me every week. It seems odd seeing him again, but I've become accustomed to it. He constantly speaks about his new clientele, the most recent agreements he has made, and, of course, his latest dishes. When we last met, he went on and on about a new method he had developed, a strange technique to prepare meat. I nodded, appearing to care. But within, I couldn't help but reflect on how far distant I was from that environment. I've never returned to his lair. I do not want to. I never learned what happened to Lena. I honestly didn't want to know. I didn't care if she ended up in an Argentinian brothel, if she were living, or if she had died. It was no longer my issue. I never asked Vega what happened to her. I knew what he was going to say. He'd probably make a joke about it. Like anything else. All I knew was that she had left my life for good. Thank you for sticking around to the finish of this gripping tale. If you were Nathan, how would you have handled the situation differently? Please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for future tales.